All right, we are live. Welcome, everyone. It's good to be back. We're here every Wednesday to help you reach your goals, get unstuck, get feedback, all that kind of stuff. So, thanks for joining us today. I'll just kind of kick it off. My name is Jacob Miller. I'm the marketing and brand manager at Headway. Um, I'm here to help you with any kind of marketing advice or just any other feedback on any of the questions that Andrew might be answering as well. So, with that, I can hand it off over to Andrew.
Thanks, Jacob. Yes, I'm Andrew, partner and CEO at Headway, and I always start every session off with this, but I think it's important context for everybody. So, my role in Headway has morphed over the years, and coming from product design to product strategy, and also handling and understanding some front end and back end development, and working really close with our team. So, really bring that perspective to the questions, and really understanding how products are built, how startups are built, and kind of helping you mitigate the risk of some of those things. And before Headway had been a part of a handful or two of different startups, ones that have failed miserably, ones that are still up and running and continuing on, and learned a lot from both, and kind of bring that knowledge here as well of what not to do, what to do, and um, all those good things. So thanks for joining us.
All right. Sorry, I'm just getting a couple things set up over here. All right. Cool. I think we can jump into our first question. Um, so this one is more about workflows, maintaining a productive team, stuff like that. And I found this one over on Reddit today. So, all right. So the question is, hey all, I'm just curious as to what the community uses to manage various aspects of maintaining a productive business. It'll be helpful if you can state your team size, nature of your business, and the kinds of productivity solutions that your team has tried. It'll be really cool to start a discussion to optimize each other's workflows. They shared they have a team of 9, and they're using right now Google Drive. They're using Notion, and then they're also using Telegram to like quickly communicate throughout the day. They said that they don't have a centralized collection of everyone's tasks, but they said their team seems to function well without it. So Andrew, I don't know if you want to share like kind of how Headway approaches workflows, maintaining a productive team, and the tools we use to do that.
Yeah, this is a good question, and one that I think is always changing for us. Jacob, you've been with Headway and, in your current role for, I don't know, 3 years coming on, going on four. I'm trying
Yeah,
to remember.
it's like 3.5 right now.
Going
Yeah.
on four coming up this summer, but we take a very experimental approach to our process, and kind of welcome new tools and try to be early adopters of things that are going to help us to advance what we do. So I would say a lot of our a big part of our organization happens in Notion, and that's kind of our organization and our dashboard of choice for really all the teams. It includes the wikis, it includes notes from meetings, things like that are necessary. But then we also partner and pair that with Asana for task-driven stuff, and that might change in the future. Like Notion's coming out with their API, they're having better task tracking, and so how we leverage Notion as a singular tool might change over time. But normally tracking tasks and things of our team in Asana. And I think the big thing there is just setting expectations with each other around when we plan to do things, and realizing that as a team, a lot of things um, go through multiple people's hands to get done. And so understanding what's coming down the pipeline, or maybe what's delayed and where you can help, is really important to use Asana for that. When we think about our product teams, we like to really align the work of the team around a user story map. So we use Stories on Board, and that Stories on Board story map essentially gives the customer and our team a understanding of releases that we're creating for our product, and gives us a better understanding of how we can prioritize the work. So we have a book out there around using Moscow to really peel features apart, almost like an onion, where they all go to the same outcome, but the level of fidelity, the level of polish is different. So we'll use Moscow to peel things apart and try to get more value in um, earlier on, and not kind of wait until those big features can be peeled out. And so from there, we usually push to a tool. So that's really good for the team, for stakeholders, for founders and teams coming in. But then we push it to a flat backlog. And so if you're familiar with Agile and Scrum methodologies and estimations, you might be used to something like Pivotal Tracker or something like GitHub Issues or any various tools out there. And the good thing is Stories on Board will push to all of those. So you get the benefit of a really nice understanding of the end-to-end workflow and what features you're touching in a release, and understanding if you're launching a B2B platform, what what's the expectation of something being released, and then you're pushing it to Pivotal Tracker for the team to be able to prioritize vertically, and that's where you get that flat backlog, or you can talk more about dependencies. So we use that quite a bit. Our teams also live in Slack a lot, and so from a internal and external standpoint, we all align around Slack, and we have teams for each department or channels for each department. We have channels for all of our clients that everyone who's contributing on those projects get access to. Sometimes we'll create wormholes with our client Slacks, essentially where it just creates a link between our two channels where they don't have to join anything new. But I think the other thing that's really helpful for us for visibility is all the different apps and Slack bots that we have. For things like time off, we use Calamari, and that has a Slack app where you don't have to really leave the channel or leave Slack to be able to do that. We have across different teams, like, hey, when we get new marketing signups, chat bots, things all come in to a singular place and really cut down the clutter for the team inside of email. And really the goal there is to create visibility for the team in Slack, so you're not trying to relay a ton of messages over email, and if someone forgot to reply all, and now what do you do? So we try not to send emails when possible. Obviously, when we work with external teams, we do that. For I'm trying to think of what other productivity solutions we use. I mean, I personally use Birdseye, which is a tool that we've worked on, kind of hacked on a few times. We ran a design sprint on it. Our dev team's been building it in a few different technologies, but that aggregates everything we're doing from Asana to Trello to GitHub Issues into one inbox for you to really prioritize what you do. Trying to think, Google Drive is a big thing. When we moved to Notion, we moved away from Google Drive. So we still use that for some slide decks. We still use that for file sharing. I don't know, Jacob, if you want to speak a little bit to how the marketing team
Yeah.
leverages those things.
Yeah, for sure. I think like our tool of choice just for design right now is Figma, like even from all marketing stuff for the most part. And it allows us to quickly like review things and like find things as needed if we need to export like a different size or like get it reconfigured or change text or something. It allows us to quickly do that. Figma is great for that. We have templates in there and stuff. And then we do use Google Drive basically for like storage and sharing. We haven't really I can't think of a different way. I mean, we could use Dropbox too, but we already pay for Google Drive, so like let's just use it. And then we can have it's easy to add and remove access with Google Drive if we're sharing with any like external folks that aren't within Headway. So, but yeah, we use frame.io for also like reviewing videos and leaving feedback as well. So yeah, otherwise Notion, we're in Notion all the time. Grammarly is great for making sure you're typing the right things all the time. We're using HubSpot, I mean, for marketing too. Yeah, I think that's the gist of it for marketing.
Yeah, I would say the big thing for us in maintaining a productive business is kind of the L10 structure that we have. So Headway runs on EOS, and so every once a week, every department meets. There's some variation in dev. It might be a subset of the team. Same thing with design, but we have L10s that really help us align around the status of projects, issues that come up kind of in the weeds week to week, and really help us to chat through those and continue moving things forward, or decide to deprioritize things altogether depending on the needs of the business and what's happening. So those weekly syncs are really important for us to stay aligned, and really important touch point that I think helps cut down on a lot of the other, I guess, kind of meetings that could come up throughout the week. It's kind of scheduling time where we have time dedicated to discuss issues, as EUS calls them. They could just be topics, but discuss issues and get those solved.
Yeah, I just added a link in the chat there. There's actually an article from the EOS organization. The the title of the article is called "What the Heck is a Level 10 Meeting?" So yeah, so definitely dig into it. We use it every week across our teams. It definitely helps us like focus on like the most important problems first, but also making sure that like our bigger projects are on track. So awesome. Looks like we got Chad's joining us. Welcome, Chad. I think we can. Oh, he doesn't have a question. He just wanted to say hello. How's it going? Yeah,
Hey, Chad.
glad to have you here. Thanks for joining us. Awesome.
Yeah, if you have a question, drop it in, or if you want to hop on, we do have audio here on the live stream. So Jacob can send you a link, and you can hop
Hmm.
in and use audio or show your video as well. So
Awesome. Cool.
awesome.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to ask you, Andrew, was just, because we do have a big focus on experimenting with the tools we use, but then I think we also have an emphasis on like just like the, I guess, human potential and communication of all of us as people. So, we've been doing a lot more, like we've been going through workshops as a team on just like emotional intelligence and communication.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to speak to that at all and like how that's
Yeah.
impacted our teams.
Yeah, I mean that's a a great point. Like being productive is saying how you feel, and so we talked a lot about the tools, but the people side of things is more important. Like if you don't feel comfortable to bring issues up to the team or to me or to Jacob or to anybody, there's likely things going to be missed. And so, we've done quite a bit with Zach, who's our head of people here at Headway, to do sessions on Dare to Lead, which is a book by Brene Brown, sessions around EQI. We have some sessions coming up at our team week, really just understanding who we are as people, and not to paint us into boxes, but to just kind of have a reference point for each other and understand kind of what each other's expectations are, how do we communicate better with each other. And so that's something that, to really be productive, is this understanding, hey, if I'm bringing something to Jacob and it's an idea, what level of clarity is he seeking, right? Does he just want it, and this kind of goes into some of the DIS stuff we do. Do you just want it direct and end of the facts, or does he want the journey of how I got there, what, the substantive evidence of why I think it's a good idea, like all these things, or is he just looking to cut and dry, like here's what I think we should do, here's the results I think you can create, and go from there. And understanding what each person's default is and where their expectations are is really good, not only for the team, but also understanding the client and how you can communicate well. But a big part of EOS and the leadership team and L10s and everything is the last 10% of the truth. So being able to challenge each other directly, and I think that's really a big part of being productive, because there can be so many things on teams, and even small startups, big teams, where things go unsaid and those fester, and resentment builds up. Or the other side, which I think is really important for us, and just understanding kind of our role as we reach out to people to communicate, is setting expectations. Like instead of me saying, hey Jacob, do you have 5 minutes, right? Like
Yeah, it
we
makes me
talk a lot
anxious.
about like catastrophizing and trying to to understand whether or not no, just basically squash assumptions, or hey, what is this? Am I getting fired? Am I, all the things that run through your head when you get a short note? How can we add context and alleviate kind of some of the stresses that are really unneeded? And if there is a hard conversation coming up, being clear about that. Hey, would love to talk to you for 10 minutes about this thing, so
Hmm.
so you can both get in that frame of mind and come prepared to what Brene Brown calls like rumbling with vulnerability. So you can do it in a healthy way and challenge each other, and not feel like you have to pull punches, but set expectations with each other. So I think
Yeah.
that's super important to being productive. Is, hey, can we say how we feel, and can we overcome those together?
Yeah, and I think like the biggest thing that I've learned from that, going through that workshop with Zach was like you can say how you feel, but make sure you say it in a way that's not like offensive or like you're attacking other people. Like understanding the language you use is also super important. So I think for all of us, like it's been I think across the team, everyone said like it's been like just a great experience after going through those activities together and going through the workbook and just like learning to listen to yourself before you say things, or not being afraid to like bring
Hmm.
things up, like is the one thing. And it's not like that we've always had that ability across the team that people can bring things up and be honest, but sometimes it's up to us, like, if we're shy or not. Right. So I think just reminding everybody all the time that like, hey, you can share what's on your mind and it's okay. Like we're not going to hold anything against you. Like
Yeah.
we need to fix these problems together. So yeah.
Right. And I think that's a big part of any company, like being ego free, being willing to fix some mistakes, and like open to the blind spots that you have, or the approach you're taking has, or really anything like that. Like, hey, let's own this together and get there. And I think that's huge. And so that kind of to assist with that and in being productive and having those conversations, we have a list of Rumble starters on, hey, how can we start these hard conversations? How can we
Hmm.
have them so we don't avoid them and push them off and say, oh, well, later we'll work on that. Later we'll work on
Hmm.
that. And later never comes. So giving
Yeah.
each other
Yep.
that ability. And I think, as you were mentioning, doing those trainings and having the whole team in on those, and the whole company in on those, it's like we had conversations that maybe we wouldn't have taken that far, right? And that's where that last 10% of the truth comes in, where we'll have the 90% conversation, but like there's really the 10% that's the whole thing
Hmm.
that we won't bring up. And so I think just giving each other permission to feel, acknowledging people's feelings, and then understanding like, hey, how can we get over this or through this? So
Yeah. Yeah. One thing, I had a friend of mine that she shared with me, and because I said, "Oh, we should do this thing someday," and she's like, "Well, someday's not on the calendar. Let's pick a day of the week." And
right,
like I was like, "Oh yeah," because like you, oh, we should figure that out someday. Like you always say that. And it's like, well, no, if you don't like make the time to like work on the issue or to work through those feelings together, like it won't happen. So,
right,
yeah. Well, awesome. Yeah, I wanted to make sure we brought that up because I feel like that is just as important as the tools that you're using.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
awesome. Uh, I just wanted to say hello to Siat. Thanks for joining us today. Good to have you back. She's been sharing about Hugo and asking if we've been using Hugo yet.
I was on
So,
it. Yeah, I actually downloaded it. We reviewed it, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago. Um,
mhm.
I haven't used it. I still get their emails. I haven't used it fully. I integrated my calendar and started to use it, but I think I just fell back into my normal behavior, which was like, oh, I'm putting the agenda notes for any new meetings like in the meeting itself.
Yeah,
So I haven't. It also probably would help if other folks from our team used it.
yeah. I think yeah. I'm actually I should just put it on my calendar to try it out. Yeah. Well, awesome. I think I don't see any questions in the comments yet, so we can jump to this next question here from Reddit, and I will just right here. Here we go. So, what should I do before hiring a designer for my mobile app? And they share, I have an idea for an app, which I made a quick prototype in React and Node before realizing that it would work much better as a mobile app. So, I've been designing mobile screens to get the basic flow and information needed down, but it looks very cold and themeless. So, it doesn't feel like it has a good design. I think I want to reach out to some designers to hire someone to help bring the designs to life before I code them all up. Before contacting designers, though, I thought I should have a game plan. I was thinking I should finish my cold practical designs and have some inspiration art and then a solid app pitch. So the questions are, what else should I have before contacting designers? What should I look for in a designer? And how can I make sure I convey the idea that's in my head? Um, I'm worried about that I'll explain it to them, pay them, and then get something totally different back. And any other pitfalls or recommendations would be greatly appreciated. Thanks in advance.
It's a big question.
Yeah.
I think the big thing, that this assumes is that you already understand your customer, and I think, we'll continue coming back to this. You understand who you're serving, the problem you're helping them solve, the value that you're going to provide for them, and you're kind of at the tail end of it, which is, well, what does that materialize? What does that look like? Is it, it's a mobile app, but what does it do? So I would urge you before, depending on your budget and resources, before you have that, like working through your prototype as bad as you think it is, and trying to level that up. I mean, there's some really good, if you're a developer, there's some really good, I'm trying to think of what is called refactoring UI. Is essentially a good video series. There's a bunch on YouTube, smaller ones of like how would you take in a UI that maybe you created as a developer and like start to level it up, and how do you think about layout and some typography and hierarchy and things like that. So there's likely some strides you can make, but if you already have it functioning, I would urge you to try and use that to learn instead of kind of creating the end visuals for it. So it would depend on what your goal is for for this phase. Like, do you feel like you already have a strong grasp on the customer segment you're serving, the problem that you're solving for them, and the value that they would get by you solving that? In which case, hey, you should definitely think through your preferences, maybe collect some competitors that are in the market, really do some visual kind of um, like research that you can then bring to a designer to help communicate your vision better. Since you did mention like, hey, your designs aren't there yet, so what are things that you feel like you could emulate, or what are aspects you like, and essentially create a mood board, which I think we might have a mood board template in Figma. I'd have to look. Essentially creating a mood board that you can talk through of like, hey, my idea is XYZ. Here's the components that I think are really key to this experience. And obviously you're driving a lot of that. The other option is for you to find a designer who's going to do, you know, um, like an internal UX audit. So like understand the experience, what they're trying to do an external UX audit. So do some interviews with customers trying to use the app. Like what can you learn with the tool you've already created that will help you design a better version that's kind of goes beyond your initial thoughts. So trying to think of what else. Conveying the idea in your head, yeah, like sketches are super helpful. I think the biggest thing there, in pitfall that we see is people will essentially, tell designers, or we get this a lot where people come in and say, hey, I want to develop an app, but not really understanding the aim of that. Like, sure, you can really design anything. If you look at Dribble today, like there's tons of beautiful designs out there that aren't practical. So trying to balance, like, what are you really trying to do here? Are you trying to learn? Are you trying to launch a version to your customers in 2 weeks? Like those constraints will start to drive what your capabilities are from a design perspective. And really, is it a practical app utility that needs to be a little bit more streamlined, or is it something that, the technology and the design is a feature of it, where you might need to put more time and resources into it? So I guess the pitfall there is making sure you understand the outcome that you're trying to get customers to, and then how you can use design to do that. And I think conveying those 2 points, and looking for a designer should help them grasp, hey, are we designing this just to be, just to level up the visuals, or are we actually designing the end-to-end experience where kind of two sides to UX? So one side is, are we solving the right problem? And then the other side is, are we solving the problem well in an intuitive way? And so kind of balancing those. I know
Yeah.
I kind of went around, but it's hard
hmm
to.
Well, yeah, we don't have a full picture of this.
Yeah,
Like, we don't know if the idea is validated, but this could be that first part where maybe they're just trying to maybe they have the ability to create a quick working prototype because looks like they can code. So they just want to get it before they get in front of people. They want it a little more polished. But I know that Scott recommended or asked about no code for testing that
yeah,
idea out first, which is a good thing you could try too. And a lot of no code tools have great design elements to them, or great kits that you can start with.
yeah. And
Um,
even though you're using React and Node, I would just create a mobile responsive site. So just take the same views you've already created and just adapt those for mobile, and you can get those in front of folks as well.
yeah. We do have a question from on YouTube here from Rocky. Um, I can share that here below. All right. What suggestions would you have for someone trying to find a co-founder? I know it's kind of a big question because it depends, right? But what are your thoughts on that, Andrew?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we've answered this before. I'm trying to think of what specifically. I think like finding meetup groups, finding places online that co-founders are looking. You're looking. It depends on. Are you trying to find a co-founder? Are you trying to find a business co-founder or an entrepreneur? Maybe you could clarify, Rocky, what type of person you're finding, and maybe we could draw some communities for you. But social asking for introductions is another way. So I know a lot of people will go to meetups. Obviously now that's harder, but go to remote meetups or meet and greets or get introductions through a platform that we mentioned before. That Headway's been a partner in, called Kinetic, where you could meet potential co-founders there. But I think essentially trying to leverage who you know in your network, obviously putting an ask out to people that might be a good fit. And if they're not, hey, do they know anybody? And the the whole concept of everyone knows someone you don't. So asking for referrals, and I think another big place would be different communities on Slack for startups and for co-founders. So there's one community specifically that I'm thinking of called Launch, and that's launch-chat. I wonder if they still have a landing page, but essentially founders, co-founders, designers, developers, entrepreneurs are all on there. So trying to find those small niche Slack communities where people are building stuff. I would also say, depending on how technical you are and what you're looking to do, makerpad.co. might be a really good resource and community for you to join. That's primarily uh, around no code, but they do have community forums, they have community things. So starting to, you know, to find places that you could let people know that you're that you're looking for a co-founder is helpful. I think the big thing in either finding a co-founder, finding investors, or finding in customers is being able to tell the story of, what's the opportunity you see in the market, what have you done to try and validate that, what feedback do you have, what data do you have, because really you're, as a startup founder, you're always selling to those three people, to people to join your team, whether that's co-founders or, your early hires, investors, or, customers. So making sure you understand your story and your narrative is going to help you, hey, when you do get introductions, you do get connections to people, being able to, tell that story well, I think is really important. So you're not saying, hey, I'm starting a startup, I'm not sure what it is yet, do you want to join? That's not really compelling, right? But if you said, hey, I'm starting a startup and we're attacking the cryptocurrency space, there's a blind spot in the industry that's XYZ, and I know that because I've been following crypto for 12 years, and here's how we plan on tackling that, do you want to join us? It's a $58 billion industry that's growing, right? Having some kind of evidence behind it, even if those are estimates, to say like, hey, what impact could this idea have, and trying to align with co-founders around the mission of the company, I think is important.
Yeah. Awesome. I shared a couple links. I'm not sure if that launch.chat link works anymore. That site might be down, so my apologies there. But our next question is about design. So Ranak asks, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. As a traditional product designer, how would you suggest I transition into digital product design?
So by traditional, Ronak, I think you mean like industrial designer, like physical product designer? Maybe he could clarify on that real quick. But taking that assumption forward until we hear more, I think a lot of the processes are the same. And I actually had a call with an engineer from an industrial design company last week. And the process is the same, right? Like as far as testing, you want to get prototypes out there. In digital, we have the benefit of, even though in industrial design you now have the benefit of 3D printing, of more modeling tools, of faster iterations. In digital, it's a lot of the same process and iteration where you're trying to get customer feedback, you're trying to have them use it, you're trying to observe pitfalls. And so I would say, purely from a like process standpoint, it's probably really well aligned. But from a tool standpoint, that's probably where your biggest hurdle is. So instead of going in, SketchUp or CAD or Blender or other 3D tools, depending on what you're using, there's probably um, some parallels that you can draw, and so would recommend starting to learn tools, and we talked about this at an earlier session, but essentially trying to come up with an idea that you have and like understand the process you take from industrial design, and then try to create and work your idea through that design process to learn the tools. So digging into Figma would be the tool I would recommend, that allows you to do wireframing. It allows you to do design libraries or components. It also allows you to prototype really high fidelity. So a lot of cases, we'll help companies go and create those prototypes and go sell those to users, whether those are consumers or businesses, and sell on those prototypes. So I would say your stack just changes a little bit from the tools you're using today to tools like Figma, to tools like you probably want to understand from a digital perspective accessibility and how that's at play here. That you might have been exposed to some of that as an industrial designer, but as a digital designer, and there are fines and fees and things that reviews that happen for compliance for banks, for healthcare companies, if your digital tools aren't accessible to those that are either hard of hearing, so screen readers and the Araya labels, or contrast wise, like if you're not serving those markets, and um, really not legible to folks with different visual impairments and stuff. So I'm trying to think of some other good, very tactical. We have a prototyping series with Figma. It's probably a little bit out of date since we started that, I think, 2 years ago now.
Hmm.
out of date as far as like Figma's advanced quite a bit, but there's probably some tools that we can dig up in Figma's community where you can learn like, layout, structure, typographic hierarchy, learn how to create components. And so um, my biggest recommendation would be to, rather than wait for an opportunity, try to create an opportunity for yourself to learn, create, a product idea that you, or digital product idea that you wish existed, and try to run that forward, through the design process, and really use that to hone the tools. Because then you can kind of bridge the gap and start drawing similarities. I think the other thing would be, finding a mentor in design who can kind of help you as you get started, or if you have friends in the industry as well who can help give you feedback and draw those similarities between industrial design and digital design. But based on my understanding of a lot of the processes for industrial design, the biggest hurdle would probably be the tooling and the things, the nuances that are different. So if you're designing for iOS, there's certain best practices, designing for iOS and Android and pattern navigation things. And if you're designing for web, there's frameworks that you likely have to design in mind. So if your development team that's actually bringing it to life is using Material UI or using Foundation or Bootstrap, or, there's just constraints you have to try and understand as a designer, and say, since you know the rules, so you know when to break them. So trying to understand those things is super helpful.
Awesome. All right, we're going to jump over to this next question. Jessica asks, prototyping is a team sport. However, how do you do it in a company if you volunteer for them and they have no initiative to call you to collaborate? Have you lived through this before?
Yeah, that's a unique problem for sure, especially if you're volunteering for somebody and they don't have the time, or just aren't available, or maybe aren't interested in being in that process with you. I would kind of take that as an opportunity to, either get permission, or, you know, move forward and ask for forgiveness later. And just, I think the designer's job in a lot of cases is trying to sell the vision and make it real and make it tangible. And so folks not, that you're working with might not have seen that before. They don't really know what all goes into prototyping or the possibilities. So I think using prototyping as a way to explore, how might we, or what if scenarios, and present those to the team so they get excited about the possibilities. And really, I think the benefit there is treating design almost as throwaway, that you can prototype ideas really quick, you can change your mind really quick, and you can iterate with those teams. That might, presenting them something, and talking about how you can iterate it, fairly quickly in a matter of days, might help them to get more ingrained and bought into the process of, hey, if we provide feedback, we can improve this and make this better. And maybe also talk a little bit about how you would use prototyping to get feedback from customers. In this case, if it's a nonprofit, if it's a nonprofit you volunteer for, you know, using prototypes to test new ideas and offerings and packages for their members and their supporters, I think is really important too. So trying to use prototypes to answer to their business goals, or to what they care about, whether that's increasing donations, or, and I'm kind of making a jump there as far as, you're volunteering for a nonprofit. But I think trying to use it as a storytelling tool and narrative tool to show them what's possible. I think even companies that we work with today um, haven't used prototyping before, or haven't really used this rapid iteration of design before. And once they do, I think they start to see that, oh, this can create alignment. This can create a lot of a lot of alignment around what decisions get made for where the company and the product goes next.
Yeah, I also wonder too. Just I'm not fully sure of the situation that she's in, but I'm also wondering if she wants to be involved but isn't being called to be involved. So I wonder if it could be as simple as, and I'm sure she may have brought it up, but I think making it more vocal when you can, to say, hey, I actually want to learn a lot about this process. If this is the case, it'd be really important to me. I'd love to be involved with it. And I'd appreciate it if I was a part of that process with you. And so, and then just showing that initiative, like if you do get involved, like Andrew was saying, like just like learning, just learning all the things that you can in your free time, and just showing them that like you do care, you're going above and beyond on your own time to be a part of their team and help them succeed. So if that's the case, so all right. So I think we can go to this next question here. So yeah, if you're joining us now, be sure to ask a question on YouTube. We're here to help, whether it's about idea validation, anything with your startup, anything with design. We can answer in the chat. You can also hop on this call right now and like talk to us if it's a complicated question, or you can like share your screen if you want feedback on like on a design or something you're working on. So, all right, I'm going to jump to this next question in Reddit. Right here. I'm actually going to jump to this other one before I go to the third one. But so the question is, um, how can we know that our idea or product is ready for the market? We are 1 week away from our launch with our marketplace app, with some technological innovations within. The problem is that we feel we are ready in all aspects, but still afraid as we might be missing something. So the question is, how do we make sure before the launch that we're ready? We did short one-on-one calls with 200 plus users, 40 plus physical stores visited on the same niche. Contacted people within personal networks with huge experience in that niche. And the summary of these calls was it was very promising, solves a problem, but there's still some problems we can't sort out as they're based on bad human behavior. So I think that's always an interesting thing because it's like you want to solve everything right before you launch. But what are your thoughts on that, Andrew?
Yeah, I would say, are those customer um, requested items or customer things that they've acknowledged they have bad behavior. I think a lot of, and we talk about this in some other of our videos and talks as well, but a lot of being successful as a business and as a startup and a tech platform is changing behavior. And so if we kind of consider humans as faulty, we try to have to, we kind of have to give them, um, referring back to BJ Fogg's behavioral model. So that just means to design for a specific behavior, there needs to exist motivation. There needs to be an ability present for them to act on that and to create that behavior, and there needs to be a trigger, whether internal, external. And so as we think about changing behavior, and we work with startups on this all the time, we have to ask ourselves, like, are people motivated enough to solve this? And that gets back to what we talked about earlier of understanding the customer, understanding the problem, and really what the value is and the outcome they're trying to get to. And if that's not valuable enough, the likelihood that they're going to download an app or go to a different app to do that, if it's not valuable enough, like, their motivation is going to be a lot lower. And so if you're familiar with BJ Fogg's work, there's like this behavior and motivation line essentially where the friction becomes too much for somebody to act on it. Like, hey, they might say they want it, but hey, for me to, I don't know, for me to get something done, I need to, open a brand new browser, go to this thing, send an email, do this other thing. That's a lot of friction, just that number of steps. And I'm speaking very abstractly uh, about that, but figuring out like how much do they care to solve it. And so before you launch, and there, I was trying to look up a tweet here as we were talking. So Hale, who is the um, was the founder of Mixpanel. He's building a new app called Mighty, and he tweeted, and I'm trying to find it. He spent the last year getting 10 customers to use their app every day, to love it, and to pay for it. And so, like, when you think about like ready to launch, one, you should always be launching. You can always be launching. Your product's going to continue to iterate. But two, looking at like, are we actually, getting people to this desired behavior? Are we getting them to this desired outcome, and understanding whether or not what you're doing is moving the needle? Because the risk you run is, let's say if you're launching and you have a marketing budget, you have this funnel that there's no bottom to. So you're not actually going to convert anybody because you're not able to change their behavior or speak to them in a way that increases their motivation or reminds them of why they should care about doing this certain thing. So I would say as we go to launch, making sure you have people that have done it before. And even before you like build your product or go to launch your full version, getting people there manually is super helpful. So trying to peel back, this idea of launching into, well, how do we know it's going to work, right? If and you're trying to answer the question and really estimate, hey, if we get 1,000 people to sign up, we should know how many people are going to convert down the funnel, not only just from a purchase standpoint, but hey, after they purchase, are we getting people to this successful outcome where we understand how long they're going to be around? Because I think the worst thing you can do as a startup is to launch before you know whether or not you're providing value. well, I guess launch a marketing campaign, you know, with any size budget that's not to learn and it's to gain customers, because if you can't get them to those successful moments, and them to stick around and really understand what, you know, what place your product has in their life, they're going to continue to kind of fall through that funnel and maybe sign up, maybe convert for a month, but in month two, you know, you realize that your churn's super high. So getting people to those successful moments is important.
Awesome, for sure. I shared a link. I know Andrew, you talked about the behavior and the triggers and stuff in a recent video that we had on YouTube. I think from November. So I put a link to the actual time in the video where Andrew talks about the that behavior graph and like uh, what makes people actually use a feature versus not. So
Yeah, I think
yeah.
just looking at the question again, the only thing I would add is um, like being more manual up front and concierge and understanding, you know, it sounds like are you on the bottom one here, Jacob?
Yeah, I skipped to the bottom one. Yep.
Yeah, you know, so this particular person had some calls with 200 potential users, a bunch of stores in the same niche. They contacted people. You know, I think just making sure that you have them using your product. You know, the thing we talk about all the time is like people will lie to you with the best intentions and not intending to lie or with any ill will, but you know, oh yeah, I would definitely use that. And then it comes time to do that and they won't use it. So getting folks to those wins. So going beyond the calls and actually getting, you know, it'll help with your marketing too, getting case studies, getting wins, you know, from customers that you can put on your site, and tell the story versus saying, hey, I think we're ready, right? And so
Hmm.
treating it more as a beta program and, you know, not putting all that pressure on you as a founder to say, hey, we're going to have this big launch and it's going to blow up and it's the next Clubhouse, right? And that's a very rare story in that, you know, most companies like, you know, Airbnb, I think they launched in 2008. There's a lot, you know, Twitter launched in 2007 or six, I forget. But you rarely remember the launch dates because companies are always launching and always evolving. You know, you only remember them when they take off, and that's, I think, a big part of can you concierge and help guide customers through and, you know, really meticulously understand where it's not serving them and what gaps your app has. So taking that experimentation mindset.
Awesome.
But ready for market could mean anything, right? How do we know that our idea is ready for market? It could mean, you know, ready to serve them with a service offering.
Yeah, I think it's a definition's different for everybody, right? I think I was listening to a podcast yesterday and just the definition of what is an MVP is different to everybody, right? Like someone that's been working in a corporate environment, like MVP might be like something that actually like is super polished because it's like there's so many their jobs on the line basically. Like the MVP needs to be really good, but then for like someone that's bootstrapping, MVP is like you were saying, like a manual process, like a minimum viable product. What's the least amount of work I can do to actually get a paying customer,
Right.
right? Even if it means like there's no tool, it's like I'm just literally doing a service, and then like that is like validating that product could exist. So yeah.
Yeah, it goes back to the saying that, you know, people don't buy a drill, they buy a quarter inch hole, right? So if someone goes to the store and they want to buy a drill, it's because they want to hang something on their wall or, you know, drill a hole into something to screw it. They don't necessarily want the drill, they want the hole. So understanding that outcome and, you know, if you had a service that came around and, you know, you could call someone up and in 10 minutes they'd put a hole in your wall, you probably wouldn't buy a drill, right? You would
Hmm.
just say, oh, we'll just call up this service. And, you know, there's different alternatives that you could offer where people would engage.
It's funny, there's an example just because I was looking into like podcast editing services and stuff, like, and you know if you're hiring like a podcast editor, odds are you're emailing them, right? You're probably going to send them files to Google Drive, then there's some back and forth with like maybe using Google Docs or something. But there's actually a company that created this awesome, like they do a bunch of podcast editing, but they actually created their own tool. Like you go to their website and it has like a dashboard where like you upload all the files, you upload any other assets or like notes to it. You let them know what service you want. So like if you want like just regular editing, super polished editing, you want sound effects or like music added, you just do all that. And so, but I can only imagine for years they probably did that manually, right? They may
Right.
have had like a Google Doc that said fill out this information or a Google form, and they're like, wow, what if we just had our own tool where we could manage this better and we could save on storage and we're not using all these other services? What if we just had our own? And that's what they did. So I think that's like a really good example of like going from manual to like actually have a product. And you may not even sell the product. It's just like added value to your service because it feels good to go to a page where you know it's like a secure environment created by this company, right? You're not just uploading to random Google Drive folders that you don't know who has access to, right?
Right.
So yeah, so I think that I thought of that right away when we were talking about just the concierge approach. So, um, well, awesome. Um, let's see. Did we have any other comments come in? Awesome. Oh, thanks, Jessica. We appreciate it. Awesome. All right. I think we can jump to this next question. It's kind of relative, actually, to what we were just talking about. And this one is specifically about an idea that this person has. Um, So right here. All right. So they want to create a service where people can hire photographers. So a website that has a login feature, database, and profiles. Because there are obviously sites that where people have like their portfolios or people have Instagrams and stuff, but there's probably not a simple way to be like compare pricing, right? Like quickly like create like a list of like your favorite photographers and then just see what one is the best fit, something like that. But they were saying, I want to create a service where I can hire photographers. You log in, you either hire for a photographer or customer looking to hire one. I'm picturing you able to scroll through photographers, see their image portfolios, customers be able to rate them. Oh, that's kind of cool. So you can have reviews and ratings. It actually would be really cool. Um, but they said, I hear it's quite complicated and requires capital to hire devs or spending a lot of time to learn yourself. But I also see people recommending sites like WordPress, Shopify, Webflow, GoDaddy, etc. So they're just asking for anything with experience like this or tips on how they could do that without spending a bunch of capital to get it going.
Yeah, I think here kind of gets to the idea of demonstrated demand. Like, can we with a marketplace play, you have two things. You have the photographers and people who want to hire them. Like, can you create a marketplace where, to end users, like you could manage it through static website. You could do it on WordPress, right? You could have, just thinking of how you might connect this, you could have a WordPress site with a super simple backend using the default template that WordPress comes with. You could have a type form that basically gathers information from photographers, and so they could upload, let's say, 10 photos, and they could set their price, all of those things. And when they submit it, you could set up a Zapier that would send that type form response to your WordPress page, create a page for you, and then say, send you an email and say, hey Jacob, Andrew wants to join as a new photographer. His page is ready to review, and it would link you to, the backend admin of WordPress. And if you wanted to go live, you could say, yeah. So you could build up a quick repository that way using kind of those three tools: WordPress, Zapier, Typeform. You could also build a form in WordPress. Like, there's other options like Ninja Forms, but we don't
Mm-hmm.
have to go into those details. But so then the question is like, hey, if I have photographers, how am I going to attract people who want to hire photographers, right? And so if you can do a small test, and a lot of times you'll see this in, since it is, I guess there are sites out there now that we're in more of a remote world where they hire people where they are to take photos that fit a certain theme. But assuming you're hiring a photographer to be on site or something, you could start in your hometown. And so you could say, let's say, we're in Green Bay, so Green Bay Photography or Green Bay Photographers or Find a Photographer GB or whatever.com, and we could go and talk with um, a handful of photographers, say, hey, what are you willing, are you willing to do this? If we send new clients your way, our fees 10%. Does that sound good to you? What pushback do you get as you think about a pricing model? And then as you get yeses from those photographers and you get pricing and you get all of those things, you could put those on the landing page and then start trying to drive traffic to it, and maybe reach out to companies that hire photographers, and say, hey, we have this group of photographers that you can kind of scan through their portfolio and their flip book. Excuse me. Um, you can just go and hire them right on here. And what I've seen done is kind of two things. You could get a Stripe integration for WordPress that would allow them, a user to check out, or you could even just say, have someone has a booking link and says, hey, I want to book this person, and you have an email workflow that then fires and says, hey Jacob, so and so wants to buy this. You could follow up with them. Hey, Jacob will be in touch about finalizing this, scheduling, all of those things that you have to think about. So really testing those mechanics is going to be most important. The other tool that you could use to do this is Bubble. I think we've talked about this before, but you can build a lot of those workflows right in Bubble where you're capturing, data for photographers, you're capturing data from somebody else. It does take more. There's a bigger learning curve, and there's probably more moving parts that you'd have to get up to speed with. So um, those two, two different services that you could use and leverage. But I think the main thing is like, how do you prove out that photographers want this and are willing to give up a percentage of their revenue for it, and people will pay for it,
Hmm.
rather than, now you kind of think of what you're competing with. Maybe tags and, on Instagram, you might find photographers on there in your local area if you search on the map, or you might go to I don't know, other sites. Like you might find somebody in Green Bay from Unsplash, which is a free site, and reach out to them. So just try to understand like, how do consumers or people that are booking photographers buy now, and how are you going to win and interject kind of your solution into there. So one of them
Yeah.
is very solution focused. The other one is, hey, as a business, like how are we going to beat out the tools that they're using now, or if they're working with an agency, how do we frame up the value prop in a way where we can win against the agency. I'm thinking of like a talent agency that might have, do bookings for photographers and things like that. So understanding the dynamics and the mechanics inside of the industry is going to be really important for you to craft a story that's compelling, and also actually win that traffic to come over and have the opportunity to buy. So there's a lot of different factors other than the software that we would recommend focusing on first. Even lighter way would be um, doing something via newsletter. So like getting photographers signed up, and then sending out a newsletter once a week and say, hey, we've got upcoming, photo slots for, XYZ, these people, here's the rates, or in the next month, like, sending out a feature where you have photographers willing to be a part of those, and you have kind of an audience that you're promoting to. So there's
Hmm.
different ways that you could, start testing out. Do people even want this? Like, are people looking for photographers, and um, willing to buy that way, which is a lot different than probably how they're buying today.
Yeah, and one thing I think about right away is I would start small, like not small and like as saying like you can't make a lot of money, but you can definitely be like, hey, I want to focus on one city with one search type. Like for example, the best family photographer in Minneapolis, right? And so you could basically create a site that's aggregating like the top photographers in Minneapolis that do family photos and just do that. Cause I feel like wedding photography is a little more complex. There's usually like meetings and
Yep.
like questions and stuff. Family photography or like a senior photo session or whatever it may be, those are usually like pretty straightforward. Like, oh, we pay $500 for an hour session. You get
Yep.
this many prints, whatever. So I think like removing like the barrier of complexity is really important. And like I said, like do like major cities or try to find cities where you feel like there isn't a good site that shows like the best photographers in that city, and like create a WordPress site or wherever it may be, and like just aggregate and like just start compiling those photographers in there. And when people say they want to connect with that photographer, you could just manually say, hey, I actually have a lead for you. I'll give it to you for $50 or whatever. And then once you start seeing traction there, then you could start to automate it, right? Get them connected with Stripe, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So I think that's my thought with it is like really like make it really specific and test that idea in a really specific market where people are like, yeah, I can put $500 down, no problem, right? Versus a wedding that might be like 3 to 5 to 10 grand for a photographer where there's a ton of questions and there's like
Right.
all these meetings and stuff. So
Yeah. And
that's the last thing I'll say on that, I guess.
I think about like the flow. So my wife and I our family used to live in Hawaii, and we try to go back once a year, and we got some family photos done. And the photographers, we actually got them done twice in the last 5 years. The photographers that we found, my wife had found them on Instagram, right? And so that's like, hey, how do we know people that are local, kind of searching in the video, or in the photo streams of location, and like found them and just reach out to them. So you're not competing with other booking platforms on photograph. You're competing with their existing behavior, and how people are getting inspiration now. So Pinterest, they're looking at photographers that put their work on there, or maybe looking for scenes and ideas for family photos and themes, or looking on Instagram of like, hey, we think we want photos in this place, and then actually looking into the tags and seeing all the photos that were taken, and the photographers that have done it. And for photographers, that's their business model, right? They know that by putting photos on Instagram, they're going to attract people, and they're going to get business, and they're going to find people who really like that aesthetic. So as you go into it, like you're not just competing on the best feature set, you're competing against consumer behavior, what everyone's used to, and that goes back to that behavior change.
Yeah.
Am I willing to go off of Instagram and go find a random site, to go buy photography? I'm personally not, but I might not be
Yeah.
the right target market, right? So it's like
Yeah.
niching down, like you said before, and is it business photography? Is it family photo shoots? Is it, what is it, so that you can enter into the market in a
Yeah.
targeted way?
And right now, like I mean, I haven't gone looking, but people have been messaging me and saying, "Hey, who would you recommend for wedding photographer or whatever?" So like that's literally their habit right now is they're asking their friends for recommendations. So they might be doing search but not finding what they
Yeah.
want.
Yeah. Who do you
So
use? Yeah.
yeah. But awesome. But yeah, Chad mentioned how that's how Each Street started. Yeah, they started in Madison, one city, one focus, and then they kind of went from there. So that's another good example in a different market. So
Yeah.
awesome. Well, I think we can wrap it up today. Awesome questions. Awesome. Have everybody in the chat today. Really appreciate it. Again, join us next week, same time. But before we get going here, just wanted to share my screen. We got some events coming up in March. Just kind of share my screen here. Scroll back up. All right. So the first one in March is with Jacob on the development team. He'll be talking about headless CMS, and so like the different or the different not opportunities, different tools or platforms you can use for your project, and what is headless CMS, all that kind of stuff. How do you set that up? How do you compare and know what's right for you? On March 22nd, we'll have another live interview with I can't remember how to pronounce his name, but he'll be talking about innovation engineering at Kohler. And then for Wisconsin UX on March 23rd, we'll be doing design mood boards, finding like UI inspiration for your next project, and not only like getting inspiration to start designing, but like creating alignment on your across the whole team. So whether it's with the developers, with like the founder, or with like the product manager, like how do you make sure everyone's aligned? So like as you're designing and creating it, there's no like, wait, I didn't think we were doing that. What happened to that thing or the other thing? So making an agreement. And so this is just at headway.io/events. So just head to our website. And we also have like past events, which are also on our YouTube channel. But if you head to some of these pages, it'll actually have like links to resources so that you can get everything you need from those videos. All right. Well, awesome. Another great Wednesday, another great open office hours. We'll be back again next week, same time, same YouTube channel, all that kind of stuff. Anything you want to share, Andrew, before we head out?
I don't. Yeah. Thanks for the questions. Very good. Good. If anyone has any follow-on questions, or if you're watching this later, feel free to email us at ahoy@headway.io, and we can get your questions answered. But yeah, go forth and make waves, everyone.
Awesome. Take care, everybody.